With a feeling of deep yet most singular affection, I regarded my friend Morella. My soul, from our first meeting, burned with fires it had never before known, but the fires were not of Eros. I could in no manner define their unusual meaning or regulate their vague intensity. Fate bound us together at the altar, and I never spoke of passion nor thought of love. She, however, shunned society, and, attaching herself to me alone, rendered me happy. Morella's erudition was profound. I felt this, and in many matters became her pupil. She placed before me a number of mystical writings. I entered with an unflinching heart into the intricacies of her studies. And then, when poring over forbidden pages, would Morella place her cold hand upon my own, and rake up from the ashes of a dead philosophy some low, singular words. And then would I dwell upon the music of her voice until, at length, its melody was tainted with terror. And thus joy suddenly faded into horror, and the most beautiful became the most hideous. Those disquisitions formed almost the sole conversation of Morella and myself. The notion of that identity which at death is or is not lost forever was to me a consideration of intense interest, not more from the perplexing and exciting nature of its consequences than from the marked and agitated manner in which Morella mentioned them. But the time had now arrived when the mystery of my wife's manner oppressed me as a spell. I could no longer bear the touch of her wan fingers, nor the low tone of her musical language, nor the luster of her melancholy eyes. And she knew all this, but did not upbraid. She seemed conscious of my weakness or my folly, and, smiling, called it fate. In time, the crimson spot settled steadily upon the cheek, and the blue veins upon the pale forehead became prominent. And one instant my nature melted into pity, but in the next I met the glance of her eyes, and then my soul sickened. Shall I then say that I longed with an earnest and consuming desire for the moment of Morella's decease? I did. But the fragile spirit clung to its tenement of clay for many days. But one autumnal evening, when the winds lay still in heaven, Morella called me to her bedside. "It is a day of days," she said. "I am dying, yet shall I live. The days have never been when thou couldst love me. But her whom in life thou didst abhor, in death thou shalt adore. Within me is a pledge of that affection which thou didst feel for me, Morella. And when my spirit departs, shall the child live, thy child and mine, Morella's." She turned away her face upon the pillow, and I heard her voice no more. Yet, as she had foretold, her child, to which in dying she had given birth, which breathed not until the mother breathed no more, her child, a daughter, lived. And she grew strangely in stature and intellect, and was the perfect resemblance of her who had departed. Strange indeed was her rapid increase in bodily size, but terrible were the tumultuous thoughts which crowded upon me while watching the development of her mental being. Could it be otherwise when I daily discovered in the conceptions of the child the adult powers and faculties of the woman? And, as years rolled away, day after day did I discover new points of resemblance in the child to her mother. For that her eyes were like Morella's I could endure, but then they too often looked down into the depths of my soul with Morella's own intense and bewildering meaning. And in the ringlets of the silken hair, and in the sad musical tones of her speech, and above all in the phrases and expressions of the dead on the lips of the loved and living, I found food for consuming thought and horror. Thus passed away 2 lustra of her life, and as yet my daughter remained nameless upon the earth. Morella's name died with her at her death. Of the mother I had never spoken to the daughter. But at length the ceremony of baptism presented to my mind, and at the baptismal font I hesitated for a name. What prompted me then to disturb the memory of the buried dead? What demon urged me to breathe that sound? What fiend spoke from the recesses of my soul when I whispered within the ears of the holy man the syllables, Morella. What more than fiend convulsed the features of my child as she turned her glassy eyes from the earth to heaven and, falling prostrate upon the black slabs of our ancestral vault, responded, "I am here." Distinct, coldly fell those few simple sounds within my ear, and thence, like molten lead, rolled hissingly into my brain. And I kept no reckoning of time or place, and the stars of my fate faded from heaven, and therefore the earth grew dark, and its figures passed by me like flitting shadows, and among them all I beheld only Morella. The winds of the firmament breathed but one sound within my ears, and the ripples upon the sea murmured evermore, "Morella." But she died, and with my own hands I bore her to the tomb, and I laughed with a long and bitter laugh as I found no traces of the first in the charnel where I laid the second.